Hi, and welcome to Three Questions With. Got my friend John Wellington with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about commercial real estate today. Good morning, John. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, John, I want to start at the beginning because one of the challenges I see with a lot of business owners is we want to open a business, and then we're saying, should we buy our space? Should we lease our space? Can you help people with that decision-making process?
Absolutely, Kevin. That's a great question. That's actually what I specialize in, is people understanding how a lease versus an acquisition impacts their business model, right? Because the business owner, you know your business and what's important for your clients, and sometimes you don't realize the space that you're in also impacts your vision. An example might be a lease situation where you have a business that's growing and you're getting into a space and your business cycle is growing for a 3-year period, maybe, right? And so you end up outgrowing that space. In that situation where you're facing a growth, you're not wanting to acquire a building because the way that the economy goes, and you don't want to get trapped into an asset that you bought in at, and then the property value goes down, and then you lose $100,000 in the transition. So just sitting down, understanding what the business goals are, understanding what the business cycle is for that individual, and then telling them my perspective and my experience in real estate from my personal investments and owning a couple of businesses, how I feel a lease versus owning a property would impact their business. So those are conversations that I like to have with a lot of my clients, Kevin.
John, I was thinking of you this morning as we started to get ready for the show. I remember a few years ago, my friend leased a building, and she calls me one day. She's like, "Can you explain to me what the heck triple net lease is and why it just cost me thousands of dollars?" It was one of those years, John, it just snowed a ton, and all that snow plowing, there was a roof issue, just all sorts of things. And she's like, "I just got this huge bill and I don't understand why." So you have to understand the lease, right? I mean, that's an important piece.
Triple net lease is only beneficial if you're the landlord.
It's true, though.
It's really true. So anybody who's an investor or landlord, that is the ideal situation where they feel like they get a property, a shell of a building, and then they're getting a square footage for you to rent the shell. And then the triple net lease that you're getting, you're essentially taking ownership of the building for the landowner. And so you're now responsible for air conditioning, heating, any of the HVAC systems, right? Roof sometimes, the structure of the building. If the plumbing goes bad, you didn't install the pipe, but guess what? Now you own the pipe and you have to own the maintenance in the building. So somebody sees a triple net lease, $18 a square foot for 1,000 square feet. Wow, that's a great deal, right? And then you compare it to a gross lease where it's $24 a square foot for the same 1,000 square feet. The gross lease, the landlord is responsible for the building. It's his building. So in the beginning, it looks like it's a great deal. But when you get down to the operation of it, and then you get surprised with that snow bill, or all of a sudden you have a $20,000 HVAC system that goes out, and now you own the HVAC system. But when you move out in 5 years, you don't own the HVAC system. You give it back to the property. So a triple, and there's honestly, Kevin, there's scales in between. So you can cater a lease to your benefit. So you can compromise and say, I'm not going to give you a triple net lease, but I'll give you a gross modified lease where I'll come in and I'll pay a portion of the real estate taxes, but you're responsible for the building. And so instead of having the gross lease and the triple net lease, now you're compromising and you have a gross modified lease. And that's where I really try to guide a lot of my clients, that you don't always have to take the triple net lease situation. It's a constant negotiation, and it's up to the landlord if he wants to accept it.
That's a really interesting point. John, I got one more question today. When we start a business, we're optimistic, obviously. We wouldn't be starting if we weren't. And I've had friends go to me, "Kev, the great news is I just leased this place for 5, 10 years, whatever it may be." Then year 2, John, it's not working out and we want to close the business. I still owe 3 years on that lease. So I'm still responsible, right?
It definitely, Kevin, again, that comes down to what you negotiate in the beginning of the lease. And it's really important to understand your lease agreement before you get into it. And those are one of the things that I like to point out for my clients is make sure you have a solid exit strategy. Okay, so in the beginning, if you're getting a triple net lease and they want you in there as a tenant for 5 years, don't have it in the back of your mind that you can get out of it in the next 60 to 90 days like a residential lease. Sometimes written into the lease agreement, there's a personal guarantee where you're guaranteeing that 5-year term of the lease, whether you stay for 2 years, 3 years. So when you want to vacate in year 2 or 3, no matter what your circumstances are, you've assigned a lease that you will guarantee personally out of your pocket the last 2 years of that lease. Now, most of the time, the landlord will forego that because they get another tenant in place. But you still don't want to be on the hook for another 6 months because they're trying to find somebody or they're dragging their feet, and you have no control over putting another tenant in that space. So just one of the things you want to look for in the beginning when you're looking at lease agreements.
John, sometimes people are under the impression they have the ability to sublease, but that's not always true. It would depend on the lease contract, right?
So now we're at 4 questions, Kevin.
I got a little ambitious.
Bonus round. Yeah, so subletting is another thing that you want to make sure that you look at your lease agreement and see if it makes sense for you. And a lot of times with the landlords, they have these templates from a lease where they have a lease agreement where they've downloaded from the internet. It's very cookie cutter and they just use it. And none of the tenants really, they accept this is the reality. And that's where somebody like myself can come in and sit down and look at the lease and say, look, here's what's reasonable. Here's what you can counter with, and here's what you can go back with and cater this lease to make it better for you.
Makes perfect sense, John. John, how can people reach out to you? How can they learn more?
You can reach out to me through email. I try to keep it simple just for myself because, you know, my name's John and at remax360.com. So John at remax360.com, or you can call me on my cell phone, 781-797-0766.
John, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of the day to come on the show. And as always, thanks for being my friend.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.